Welcome to the June edition of the Cairns Report video chat. I'm Gavin King, the editor of Cairns Report. It's great to be with you for another month's wrap-up. I'm here with Olivia from Grant Thornton, James from Redlich, and Vanessa from Belle Property Cairns. We are, of course, in the great offices of Belle Property Cairns here on Sheridan Street. Now, to you first, Olivia. The thoughts on the budget. This week we've had the state budget released, which comes, of course, on the back of the federal budget a little while ago. Your thoughts on the impact of those two budgets and how it relates to the Cairns economy?
Well, with the state budget being handed down this week, it was sold as a very positive recovery budget. It's very contingent on two things: international borders opening, which in turn is contingent upon a successful COVID vaccination. So they're two pretty big deals to get over the line. But in positive news, there's a lot big spend in the infrastructure, big spend on job creations, and that's beneficial to our economy. And the other big positive for us is the focus on small business, which makes up a large proportion of our region. So I think all of those things hand in hand will be quite positive. Didn't quite see the reduction in stamp duty that some of us might have hoped, but that's another key line item for the state budget's revenue, and they're indicating a certainty in economic growth in how they've calculated that, so that's positive for us.
Okay, good. Budgets are always good, particularly when elections are coming up. And of course, the Fed's potentially going to an election later this year or early next year. Vanessa, to you now, the big hot topic. Everyone wants to know what's happening in real estate. What are you seeing in terms of prices, sales, but then also the rental situation here in Cairns?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Well, it's hot. It's so busy. We're all so busy in this industry. Everyone related to this industry is busy. Builders, cleaners, everybody, as well as agents. It's very strong. It's very active. There is a shortage of supply, both rentals and sales. The number of properties on the market now compared to this time last year is almost half in the rental pool and also for sales. So there's just a lot less stock to buy, and there seems to be more buyers in so much as people have returned home, people are relocating, their build isn't on schedule, so they need to extend their lease. All sorts of things are influencing the rental and sales market. So it is definitely a seller's market, which is nice to see. It's a really nice change. It's been probably 15 years since we've seen such a strong market in Cairns, and it's very refreshing.
Good. All right. Now, James from Redlich, what are you seeing, particularly, I guess, in the building industry? It's been a big topic this year, at least, in terms of are we in the middle of a building boom? Any constraints, though, that you can see on the horizon?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. I mean, following on from what Vanessa was saying, there's been a very large residential boom in construction in Cairns, more than we've seen in many, many years. What's causing that? Again, a lot of people are moving back to Cairns. The shortage in housing stock and shortage in rentals. People are opting to perhaps build their own home, buy vacant land when there is some availability of vacant land. There's been a lot of government stimulus, as we know from the Home Builder Grant and the Regional Boost. Of course, those contracts all had to be signed before the end of March. So whilst there's no more of those contracts coming through, the majority of which are people who have signed those contracts, their houses may not have started yet. Or they'll be starting now, or a few, if you're lucky, would be finishing their construction soon. That amount of demand on the building industry has caused a few issues for lots of small builders, particularly. Obviously, when you sign a building contract, the builder agrees to a price to produce a particular house in a certain time frame, and there's issues when the builder can't meet those. So, for example, we're seeing the price of timber, particularly, is going very high for trusses and structural timber. Also, trades and concrete is very high. And I've heard of instances where small builders are actually losing up to $15,000 per house that they're completing, because the risk of them not completing, they're obviously going to be in breach of contract. Also very common in building contracts, as a standard, is if a builder doesn't complete by a certain time frame, there's a damages per day of about $50. So of course that adds up very quickly, and so builders are very keen to try and get builds done and move on to the next one and try and get through this period. And even if that means they're taking a bit of a haircut on their profits. But of course that can only go on for so long for most builders, and hopefully we don't see too many casualties from obviously unprofitable work.
It's interesting, isn't it? Unless you're building a house currently, you're probably not aware of those constraints and all the price rises, you know, in timber and concrete or whatever it is. So yeah, it's almost the flip side of the positive of the building boom.
And it's tying into that rental issue as well, because everyone who's currently renting, who's building a house and their houses aren't complete in time, they're not leaving their rentals.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah. It's tight. It's very tight. Some people aren't selling because they can't find what they want to buy. You know, there's just nowhere to go kind of thing. So we've sort of chicken and egg scenarios are happening more and more at the moment, and quite a few off-market transactions because there's a bit more flexibility with the time frame. So it is a very interesting market, one that we haven't seen for a long time, and with certain constraints. You know, the cost of renovating, building, finding people to do that work, no one's available. There's things like that. It's interesting. Yeah.
Now, to all three of you, your snapshot, your overview, what are you hearing from clients in terms of the economy? Liv from Grant Thornton, for you first.
Probably still consistent on prior months, where there's some pain or distress being felt in some hospitality tourism sectors, which is largely driven by this lack of skilled workforce. However, there are some really strong businesses out there, and certainly in a much better place than any of us would have predicted. So I think overall it's positive. It's just those few sectors where there is a bit of pain, probably still to come. And to you, Vanessa, it's hard to look into the crystal ball, of course, particularly in real estate. But how long can this run last? Like you said, we haven't had price rises in residential for so long. Any thoughts on how long will this good times roll into the future?
The big question. Look, it is a very, none of us expected to be in this position this time last year, so it is quite hard to predict. But the indicators show that there's really not going to be any easing. So I think, it should continue. And interest rates are a long way off going up, we're told. So really, I think we should continue with a strong market for the foreseeable future, well into next year. And Cairns is proving to be a very popular destination. I think our remoteness, people are looking to us like the COVID-free zone. Our lifestyle here, as we all know, is fabulous. So people are coming up here for that sea change. It's more appealing than it was in the past now. It's time to make the move. You kind of just got sick of the lockdowns, the hustle and bustle. So I think people are sort of bringing their plans forward. So I think in Cairns, we will see a strong demand continue. Which brings its own continued problems in terms of those shortages. James, to you now, you work with clients across a whole range of industries. So what are you hearing in terms of the economy at the moment?
We're very, very busy. Busier than I remember for a very long time. And clients are particularly worried about timeframes more than they ever have. Banks, of course, because of the demand on the property industry, banks are taking much longer than they traditionally have for approvals for bank finance, for loans, for buying property. And the same for selling property as well when you're trying to organise your releases of mortgage. That is a combination of things. They used to rely a lot on offshore workforce. That has definitely shrunk since COVID. Obviously Australia is doing very well. Most countries are not, and therefore there's more constraints on that overseas workforce being able to do the procedural things in credit officers and all that sort of stuff. And as a result, obviously buyers are very nervous about keeping to their timeframes. And because the market is so hot and it's such a seller's market, in that 30-day window of finance, sellers will often find they have 2 or 3 buyers offer far more money just waiting for that foot in for the first buyer to step over their timeline. So very stressful time for us. And previously it's been the reverse, where sellers are desperate to keep a buyer, but now it's completely the other way.
Yeah. Interesting times indeed, to put it mildly. Liv from Grant Thornton, James from Holding Redlich, and Vanessa from Belle Property Cairns. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you.
Gavin.
Appreciate it.